There is a theory that our familiar chronology is merely a veil concealing the true course of events, and that modern civilization, as we know it, emerged much later than we think. Many alternative researchers point to the early 19th century as a point zero, a global reset. Strangeness begins when we try to piece together scattered facts about the events of 1812. Textbooks mark this era with worldwide conflicts, yet different nations interpret this date in completely different ways, as if describing fragments of a single mosaic whose overall meaning was intentionally lost or distorted. In the New World, this era is remembered as the War of 1812 against Britain. In Russia, it is cemented as the Patriotic War against Napoleon's invasion. But in the heart of Europe, in Germany, it all comes down to a grand and bloody clash, known in chronicles as the Battle of the Nations. It feels as though these different labels hide a single, planetary-scale event that rewrote human destiny, while the true causes and consequences were hidden from us. It seems that the memory of what came before this threshold was wiped clean, leaving us with an edited version of the past where a real tragedy is replaced by dry dates of military maneuvers. The term Battle of the Nations itself is baffling in the context of German history. If you think about it, the name sounds alien for a monument to national pride. In that battle, Germans didn't stand as a united front. They fought on both sides of the barricades, for the coalition and for Napoleon. Essentially, it was a fratricidal slaughter where a people destroyed itself. Yet it was in honor of this bloody, contradictory chapter that a monument was built, one whose grandeur and mystery eclipse any logical explanation. This structure stands in plain sight, yet remains invisible to the understanding of most. Officially, it symbolizes the triumph of the coalition of Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Sweden. But one look at this object shatters all perceptions of 19th century memorial architecture. We don't see a classical triumphal arch or an elegant stele with eagles and banners. We see a gigantic, gloomy ziggurat, 91 meters high. Its heavy, oppressive form resembles a set piece for dark sci-fi or a base for an alien civilization rather than a monument to human valor. Its appearance triggers cognitive dissonance. The massive construction, as if carved from a single cliff by ancient titans, looks like a fantastic fortress or a landing module from the Alien universe. It clashes completely with images of hussars, muskets, and cavalry. The architecture is so out of step with its era that you have to ask, could people of that time, with their technology and aesthetics, have designed and built this? Or did we inherit this object from a completely different epoch, with historians simply claiming it and inventing a convenient legend about a battle? This structure doesn't just stand out from the landscape, it looks like a foreign body left by something powerful. And the closer you study its details, the clearer it becomes. This is not a monument to victory. It is an encrypted message, the key to which lies on the surface, yet is stubbornly ignored. If we try to evaluate this structure using conventional logic, the mind hits a dead end. Monuments from the early 19th century usually have a recognizable style: pompous empire style, elegant colonnades, triumphal arches with gilded eagles, or bronze hussars on rearing horses. We are used to seeing emperors in cocked hats, waving banners, and detailed bas-reliefs of cannons. However, what rises on the field near Leipzig completely crosses out this aesthetic canon, offering something frighteningly different instead. A gloomy colossus, 91 meters high, looms over the viewer. This structure looks nothing like a memorial to liberators. Rather, it resembles a sci-fi fortress, an impregnable bastion, or a technological ziggurat left by an unknown civilization. Its architecture is saturated with heavy, rough forms that evoke associations not with romantic cavalry charges, but with dark film sets about the future or an alien invasion. If someone wanted to create a stone illustration of an alien base from a Ridley Scott movie, this is exactly what it would look like. It is a monolithic gray mass that seems grown from the rock itself, or cast using unknown ancient technologies, rather than built by humans. This dissonance is especially sharp when examining the sculptural groups surrounding the monument. You expect to see soldiers in 1812 uniforms, shakos, epaulets, bayonets, and distinct coats of that era. But none of that is here. Instead of familiar military attributes, we face mysterious giants. These are bearded figures wrapped in strange robes, resembling the vestments of ancient priests or the armor of mythical paladins rather than infantry uniforms. Their faces are stern and devoid of individuality. They look like characters from forgotten legends, from a time before gunpowder. You get the strong feeling that a completely different historical period is depicted, or that the architect deliberately distorted our view of the past, replacing real participants with symbolic guardians. The very fact of erecting such a grand and gloomy monument raises even more questions given the context. Officially, it symbolizes the coalition's victory, but for the German people, this battle was a tragedy of division. Germans killed Germans across the front lines, and in honor of this bloody civil strife, this painful national wound, they built not a mournful obelisk, but a cyclopean structure radiating power and aggression. It is not a temple of grief or an altar of victory in the usual sense. It looks more like a giant energy accumulator or a sealed bunker designed to keep something from escaping. Every element of this architectural monster screams that the official legend is just a thin veil. The building's forms are alien to human comfort or harmony. They weigh on the psyche, making you feel like an insignificant grain of sand before an unknown force. This is architecture of submission, not liberation. And the longer you stare into the gray stone, the clearer it becomes. The exterior of this ziggurat is just a wrapper, hiding the object's true purpose. The most frightening discoveries await not those looking from afar, but those who dare to approach the very foot of the structure. For right there, at the threshold, the visitor is met by a figure that finally destroys any remaining faith in the official history, and makes you shudder at the thought of who is really watching us. Approaching the foot of this cyclopean structure, the sense of anxiety only grows. The main entrance is not just a door to a memorial hall, but a real checkpoint, loomed over by a figure that completely shatters familiar patterns of perception. According to guidebooks, this giant is supposed to represent Archangel Michael, the patron of warriors. However, standing face to face with this colossus, the mind refuses to reconcile what is seen with what is written. The image carved in stone evokes not reverence, but an instinctive chill, the kind felt when encountering something alien and incomprehensible. Traditional Christian iconography has taught us a specific look for angels: ethereal, beautiful beings with soft features, clad in shining Roman armor or light tunics, with large feathered wings. But the guardian of the Leipzig monument is a creature from another reality. His anatomy raises questions. The body proportions are distorted and hypertrophied. The pose is static and devoid of grace. It feels like we are not looking at living flesh, but a biomechanical construct. A soldier whose body has fused with heavy armor. There is nothing of a heavenly messenger of mercy in his appearance. This is a harsh machine for executing orders. A guardian who knows no pity. The statue's face draws particular attention. It lacks human individuality, resembling a stylized mask or a pilot's helmet from another world. The features are rough, frozen in an expression of absolute dispassion. This is the face of a being that stands several steps above humanity on the evolutionary ladder and looks at visitors as biological material. The wings behind his back also break the canon. They look like heavy, monolithic slabs, possibly functional elements of a spacesuit or technological device. not organs for flying in the heavens. The entire look of this archangel fits the description of an alien, or a representative of a highly advanced paleo-civilization better than a biblical character. It is as if he guards the entrance not to a building, but to the world order system itself, filtering those who enter. Carved above the head of this formidable sentry is the famous phrase, Gott mit uns, God is with us. In the context of such alien architecture and a frightening guardian, these words take on a sinister, ambiguous tone. Usually, this motto is interpreted as a call for divine protection. But looking at the alien features of the statue, you involuntarily ask, which god exactly are we talking about? Perhaps the inscription should be read literally, but referring to a plural or a different entity. It could be a declaration of alliance with those very gods of flesh and blood, giants who descended from the heavens, whose technology and power seemed like magic to humans. The phrase sounds not like a prayer, but like a statement of fact. Higher powers are here, they are physically present, and they are watching. This guardian at the threshold acts as a psychological barrier. He demonstrates that the territory inside does not belong to humans in the usual sense. This is a zone of alien influence. The archangel here is not a defender of souls, but an overseer ensuring compliance with rules set by someone from above. He embodies the entrance to a rigid hierarchy where humans are assigned the role of subordinates. And if the external guardian can cause shivers with his icy calm and inhuman power, this is only a prelude to what lies behind him. For the sentry is merely a servant, an executor of will. To understand who really holds the strings of control and decides the fates of civilizations, one must overcome fear, pass this stone cyborg, and step into the darkness of the inner chambers. There, in the depths of the Hall of Fame, the scale changes again, revealing the true masters of the situation. Stepping over the threshold and leaving the frightening mechanical guardian behind, the visitor enters the Holy of Holies of this Cyclopean complex. The interior space suppresses even more than the exterior facade. Here, in the huge echoing hall, the true picture of hierarchy opens up, encoded in stone, and it is infinitely far from ideas of equality or brotherhood. The gaze is inevitably drawn upward to the dome, where giants sit in niches. These figures are the culmination of the entire architectural design, and their appearance leaves no doubt. These are not soldiers, generals, or even national heroes. These are beings of a completely different order, representing a higher caste, those whom the ancients might have called gods or architects of reality. Their sizes are intentionally hypertrophied to emphasize the insurmountable gap between them and ordinary people. They tower over the space like unshakable cliffs, radiating an aura of absolute, limitless power. Their poses lack the tension typical of warriors before battle. This is the calm of those who won long ago and now merely observe the experiment. Their faces, hidden in the semi-darkness of the vaults, are dispassionate and monumental. They look like representatives of an ancient, perhaps antediluvian race that stood at the origins of civilization, or came to reshape it according to their own designs. These are images of rulers whose will is law, not subject to discussion. However, the most disturbing detail of these sculptures is what lies in their giant hands. With each of these colossi, we see children. At first glance, official history might interpret this as an allegory of protection, fatherly care for the future, or the salvation of innocent souls. But in the context of the gloomy, oppressive atmosphere, this gesture takes on a completely different, sinister meaning. The giants do not embrace the children, they hold them. This is the gesture of an owner, a curator holding a valuable resource, or a test subject. In the symbolism of ancient cultures, a child always meant the continuation of the line, rebirth, the very essence of life and the future. Thus, the Stone Chronicle tells us plainly, the future of humanity lies entirely in the hands of these giants. It is they who manage the gene pool, decide what the next generation will be, and control the very possibility of life continuing. This is not guardianship. This is total control over demography and the biological fate of the species. It seems that after the catastrophic events, roughly marked by the year 1812, these entities took on the role of breeders, creating a new breed of humans or restarting civilization from a blank slate. The fate of new generations is locked in their embrace, but these embraces resemble a cage or a lab box. The image suggests to the viewer, everything that comes after depends not on you, but on these higher figures. We are merely material here, clay in the potter's hands. These supreme hierarchs sitting under the dome are too great and distant to communicate with humanity directly. The gap in development and status is so colossal that direct contact is impossible or pointless. Gods do not stoop to explain themselves to the masses. They do not need to justify themselves or convey their thoughts to every individual. Their will is absolute, but transmitting it down to the world of mere mortals requires a complex signal transmission system. And if you lower your gaze from the heavenly heights to a level closer to the ground, you can see exactly how this control mechanism works. There, in the middle tier, a strange and frightening scene of silent information transfer unfolds, where figures act as intermediaries whose function is not to speak the truth, but to dose it. Lowering our gaze from the clouded heights of the dome, where the silent arbiters of fate sit, we reach the next level of this stone hierarchy. Here, in the middle tier, a scene unfolds that, upon close inspection, is even more frightening than the cold indifference of the giants above. If the upper level symbolizes decision-making and total power over the biological future, this belt is dedicated to the mechanics of mind control and information management. Before us stand 8 massive stone faces. They are smaller than the supreme rulers, but still suppress with their scale, looming over the viewer like ancient idols. The most intriguing and disturbing detail of these faces is their mouths. All 8 figures have them wide open, as if frozen in an eternal scream, chant, or declaration of an important message. This is not just facial expression, it is a depiction of active action. The stone heads are speaking. They are broadcasting a will sent from above. Seemingly, the monument's logic should imply that this voice is meant to be heard by the people, that the wisdom of ancestors or gods should flow freely to descendants. However, the architectural design takes an unexpected turn here, completely crossing out the idea of direct communication. Standing right in front of these talking heads are figures that official guidebooks usually call guardians or warriors. Traditional interpretation says they are guarding the peace of fallen heroes, leaning on their swords. But cast aside the imposed templates and look closely at the silhouettes, and this version crumbles to dust. What historians call swords look nothing like weapons. These objects have no hilts, no guards, no blades. In shape, they resemble huge body shields, solid shutters, or even podiums. And most importantly, how exactly they are positioned. These warriors do not stand to the side of the heads, protecting them from external threats. They stand exactly in the center, directly in front of the giants' open mouths. Their massive shields literally plug the sound sources, creating an insurmountable barrier for the outgoing word. This looks not like protection, but like an act of rigid censorship. If the heads are trying to convey the truth, the task of the figures in front is to intercept this signal, silence it, or distort it beyond recognition. We see a metaphor for a global game of telephone, captured in granite. It turns out these figures are not fighters, but keepers of secrets, censors of reality. They are intermediaries, symbolizing the institutions of power, religion, or science that have monopolized the right to truth. They stand in the path of the information flow, ensuring that the pure, undistorted meaning coming from the higher hierarchs never reaches the mere mortals at the foot. The true speech of the gods is hidden. It is blocked by professional interpreters. As viewers, we see only the backs of these censors and their huge shutters. We do not hear the voice of the source. All we get is silence, or the version of events these guardians deem necessary to voice. This composition brilliantly and sinisterly illustrates the principle of social control. Knowledge is the lot of the chosen, while the masses get only a surrogate. The giants' open mouths indicate that information is being transmitted, the data stream is continuous. But the presence of a barrier says access to it is strictly regulated. This is stone proof of a conspiracy of silence. History, technology, the true structure of the world, all this exists, but is securely shielded from the layman's perception by a layer of middlemen. The architect who created this complex clearly understood how the system works. He showed us that a solid wall stands between the will of the rulers and the consciousness of the people. And if at this level we are shown how our knowledge is limited, we need only raise our gaze slightly higher, to the second tier, to see what happens to the human personality itself in such a system. There, in tight stone niches, lies the answer to the question of our freedom. And this answer finally strips away any hope that we are masters of our own destiny. Look at those trapped in stone, and you will understand humanity's true place in this grim cosmic construction. Raising our gaze even higher to the next tier, which often escapes the casual observer, we discover perhaps the most tragic element of this grand composition. Here, in deep niches, are strange figures, whose very existence crosses out any theory about a monument to people's freedom. If below we saw those who rule and those who hide the truth, here, finally, we see those who are ruled. But the way they are depicted causes shock and rejection in anyone used to considering humans the crown of creation and free individuals. These figures do not stand freely on pedestals, as is customary in classical sculpture. They are literally embedded in the walls, enclosed in strange cylindrical volumes resembling stone flasks, test tubes, or cocoons. The persistent impression is that we are looking not at independent subjects, but at preserved objects. Their bodies are bound, movement is impossible, and the space around them is compressed to the limits of their physical shell. This is not an allegory of protection or comfort. It is an architectural metaphor for total restriction and lack of freedom. What did the author of this project want to say by placing human images in such tight vessels? The most logical and frightening interpretation suggests that the status of humanity in the New World Order, established after the events of the early 19th century, is captured here. People are shown not as creators of their own destiny, but as a resource, as biological material stored in a warehouse until needed. This is a human battery, a power element for a vast state or planetary machine, existing only within the scope of its assigned function. Its will is paralyzed, its consciousness confined within rigid frameworks, beyond which it is not allowed to step. In these stone flasks, one can see a symbol of predestination. A human is born already inside the system, inside an invisible but durable mental capsule formed by education, ideology, and those very censors from the lower tier. He may think he is free, but in reality, he merely fills an assigned niche in a giant anthill. The figures look passive, sleeping, or in a state of suspended animation. This is the state of a society that has forgotten its past, does not control its future, and exists in an artificial present created for it by higher hierarchs. There is no place for individuality here. All figures in the niches are unified, devoid of distinct features. This is a mass, a statistic, a population. They are merely bricks in the wall of a temple dedicated to someone else's victory. Their life energy, their potential, is securely sealed and used by someone else. The entire architecture of the hall at this level literally screams that free will is an illusion, and reality is rigid determinism and submission. We see a structure where everyone knows their place, and that place is a stone prison. If we piece together all levels of this gloomy pantheon, the picture becomes frighteningly complete and logical. A detailed schematic of the world order unfolds before us, encoded in granite. At the very top are unreachable ruler giants manipulating the gene pool and the future. Just below is a cast of priest censors, blocking access to true knowledge and filtering information. And at the base of this pyramid is the mass of people locked in mental and physical cages, serving as fuel for the system. This is not a memorial to a battle. It is a blueprint of a global prison or farm, left as a reminder or instruction. Looking at this social order frozen in stone, you begin to understand that it could not have arisen from nothing. Such a rigid, totalitarian governance structure is usually introduced in moments of extreme crisis, when the old world collapses and a new, ruthless order is built on its ruins. The scale of this structure and the depth of meaning embedded in it hint that the event to which it is dedicated was something far greater than just a military campaign. A planetary-scale catastrophe must have occurred, a tragedy that wiped out the previous civilization and necessitated the creation of such a strict control system. And the clue to solving this mystery lies not inside, but outside, at the foot of the monument, where the dark surface of the water spreads, holding the memory of countless losses. Leaving the gloomy halls where humanity's fate as a resource is captured in stone, and stepping out into the fresh air, the observer encounters another element of this grand complex, often perceived merely as part of the landscape design. A huge artificial reservoir spreads out before the monument. Its water surface is dark and still, and in it, like in a black mirror, the overwhelming mass of the monument is reflected, doubling its gloomy impact. Official sources give this place a poetic but disturbing name: the Lake of Tears. According to the accepted historical interpretation, this reservoir symbolizes the grief of nations for those who died in the Battle of the Nations. A beautiful metaphor intended to evoke sympathy and awe. However, if we compare the scale of this hydrotechnical structure with the real statistics of military losses in the early 19th century, a sense of monstrous disproportion arises. Could the death of soldiers, even in a major battle, generate such an ocean of grief that it required a whole lake to immortalize it? Or does this allegory hide a tragedy of a completely different order, the true scale of which we are afraid to even imagine? Looking at this water, it is impossible to shake the thought that the Lake of Tears is a monument not to a local battle, but to a global extinction. Many alternative researchers connect the date 1812 not just with border redrawings, but with a planetary catastrophe, a cataclysm that literally wiped the previous civilization off the face of the Earth. In this context, the war with Napoleon and other conflicts of that time can be seen as a cover operation, a massive falsification designed to explain ruined cities, the disappearance of millions of people, and climate change without resorting to the truth about a natural or technological apocalypse. If we accept this hypothesis, the monument and the lake before it acquire a frightening logic. This is a memorial to a lost world. The water symbolizes oblivion, the abyss into which the antediluvian era sank. And the tears are the weeping of the few survivors who found themselves on the ruins of a highly advanced civilization, thrown back hundreds of years in development. The scale of the disaster was such that it was necessary to completely rewrite history, invent new nations and new reasons for wars, just to hide the fact that humanity was practically destroyed. The lake before the temple is the physical embodiment of the void that formed in our collective memory. The reflection of the monument in the water also carries deep symbolism. As above, so below. The real world, controlled by giants and censors, has its reflection in the past, hidden under the water. This is a hint that the foundation of our current civilization rests on the bones and achievements of those who were here before us. We live on a graveyard of history, and this reservoir is the border between the world of the living, whose consciousness is locked in stone flasks, and the world of the dead, the truth about whom is carefully guarded by granite sentries. The water here acts not as a source of life, but as a barrier. It separates the viewer from the monument, forcing one to look at it from a respectful distance, and simultaneously reminds you of a flood or a wave that washed away the past. The idea that the events of 1812 were just a screen for a global cleansing of territories explains the strange architecture, the absence of Christian symbols, and the frightening images of gods. The builders of this complex knew what really happened. They immortalized not the triumph of one army over another, but the triumph of a new management system over the chaos of a destroyed world. But here arises perhaps the main paradox. If the goal of the new masters of the world was to hide the truth, erase the memory of the past, and impose a fictional history with hussars and emperors, why did they build this object? Why leave a structure in the most visible place, in the center of Europe, that contradicts the official version with every stone, every bas-relief, and every line? It seems illogical, hiding a secret by erecting a 90-meter mountain of evidence to the contrary. Such actions do not look like a mistake. Rather, it looks like a deliberate gesture. A message left in plain sight on the principle: if you want to hide something, put it where everyone can see. Obviously, the creators of this complex counted on the fact that one day, centuries later, there would be those who could read this stone cipher. The true reason why the creators of this complex decided to leave such a frank message in the most visible place lies in understanding the nature of information and time. Those who designed this monument were well aware of the unreliability of paper records. They knew that libraries burn, languages change beyond recognition, and history textbooks are rewritten by every new ruler to suit the political agenda. Words are the most unreliable way to transmit truth across centuries. Text can be distorted, banned, or declared heresy. But stone is eternity. Grandiose architectural forms speak a universal language of symbols that is intuitively understood without translation or dictionaries. In this sense, the Leipzig Colossus is not just a monument. It is a time capsule. A sealed instruction for survival and understanding reality for those capable of seeing. The builders left us a schematic that cannot be edited. This is an honest, cynical, and frighteningly frank report on how the world is actually structured after the global transformation of the early 19th century. They did not hide the truth in secret archives. They carved it in granite 90 meters high, relying on the fact that the best hiding place for a secret is an open space where people look but do not see. This stone ensemble should be perceived as a declaration of the world order. We are shown the entire vertical of power without embellishment. We are shown that there are higher curators whose capabilities exceed human understanding. We are shown the role of intermediaries who shape the information agenda and block access to knowledge. And, most importantly, we are shown our own place in this system, the place of a resource, a power element confined within rigid frameworks of social and mental constructs. This is a warning that the freedom so often spoken of from podiums is simply not provided for in this hierarchy. There is also an opinion that such revelations are left intentionally, following some karmic law or the rules of the game of higher powers. According to this logic, to rule humanity, it is necessary to formally notify it of the rules. to obtain tacit consent. By erecting such a monument, the architects of the system seem to say, "We showed you who we are and who you are. We hid nothing." If you preferred to believe in fairy tales about hussars and accidental battles, that is your choice and your responsibility. This relieves them of the moral burden, shifting the blame for ignorance onto the people themselves, who refuse to open their eyes. Now that we have analyzed every level of this structure, it becomes obvious that the official version of history is just a thin decoration stretched over a grandiose and frightening foundation. But the most disturbing thing is that this monument in Germany is far from the only artifact of its kind. If we take off the glasses offered by the school curriculum and look around, we can notice that our world is filled with oddities we are used to ignoring. Look at the architecture of St. Petersburg, Rome, Washington, or Baalbek. Everywhere we see traces of technologies that cannot be explained by the primitive tools of the past. Everywhere there are symbols unrelated to official religions, and buildings whose purpose clearly goes beyond housing or worship. Giant doors designed for 3-meter height, cyclopean masonry, underground floors buried in clay. All these are parts of one puzzle. The Leipzig monument gave us the key to the cipher, showing the systematic nature of what is happening. This message in stone calls on us to stop being passive consumers of information, symbolized by the figures in the niches. It urges us to become researchers, to ask uncomfortable questions, and to seek answers not in approved textbooks, but in the real traces of the past that surround us everywhere. The history we are taught perhaps ends where our own investigation begins. The monument to the Battle of the Nations stands as a silent challenge to our intellect and courage. It waits for us to finally understand its language. And perhaps this understanding will be the first step to escaping the stone flask and finding the very freedom we were never told the truth about. The world is much more complex than it seems, and its true chronicle is not written on paper, but carved in eternal stone, waiting for its reader.